Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Segun Oduolowu, host of Boston Globe Today, award-winning director Ismail Al-Amin, and gold medal Olympic champion Butch Reynolds.
All right, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Segun Oduolowu. I'm the host of Boston Globe Today. It is a television show. And what we have just seen is an incredible story. And it is a privilege to speak with not only Butch Reynolds, but the director of this incredible documentary, Ismail Al-Amin. Thank you, gentlemen, both for this art and for joining all of us.
Thank you.
I don't think we can start this conversation without first asking Butch, did you do it?
That's a good one. No, I did not do it. No, I did not do it. Nowhere in my soul that I can do something like that.
When you say that, to still find humor, to still have joy in your heart, how? How is this possible after they took your name, they took your career, and they still are standing behind false accusations? How do you still have this joy?
You know, you have to, one, God is good. You know, I tell you, what I've seen, what I've been through, I'm a full believer in that piece because of what I saw and how people treat those who they think they cheated. And I was treated like that around the world at one time. And like I said before, the team, Ismail Al-Amin, Bradford, the photographer, John Hawk, and myself, you know, was definitely a blessing. And then to have the team of ESPN, you know, tell that story after 34 years, we were really thankful because of that.
That's wonderful. Ismail, how did this come to you? How did you, meet Butch? How did you feel about this story? And in working on this project, where was your mind through all of this?
Well, I often say that I was kind of groomed to tell the story. And I say that because me and Butch have a 17-year-plus relationship. I first met Butch coming out of graduate school. I was recruited by his foundation to do some mentoring where we were mentoring elementary-age African-American boys, inner-city boys in the city. And, growing up in Akron, most people think of LeBron James, but before LeBron, Butch was our guy. As a former athlete, this is what we aspired to growing up athletically, young boys and young ladies as athletes in Akron. So, I really didn't know if he was innocent or not. Just like the film said, during that time, track and field was probably the dirtiest sport on earth. It's a young man, young woman sport. It's always somebody coming up, trying to take your spot. I don't know if you guys just saw the news feed, but Quincy, what's Quincy's last name?
Yes.
Quincy Wilson just won the 400 meters for the USA. It's like, that's big. So it's like, So it's like everybody's always looking for that edge to stay on top of the sport, So I hope, for someone that I admired so much, I was hoping that, that what was being said about him was not true. So getting to know him and working with him for his foundation, it was still, regardless of what I felt, it was still an honor to know him, to meet him personally and work with him, by his side. But it also gave me an opportunity to really ask some real hard questions. So and Butch would tell you, I'm a very inquisitive person. So I was just asking questions and I started to do my research on my own and regardless of if he was guilty or not, as you saw, Butch has a hell of a story. So basically, I basically I was just persistent, like, hey man, Butch, how come the story hasn't been told? And Butch is a man of faith, and he often said, he was like, man, it's not time yet. And I'm sitting up there thinking, man, it's time, yo. It's time. So, over the years, doing my research and I had came to the point and I was like, man, you know what? I'm gonna tell the story. I didn't know how I was gonna do it.
Yeah, let's talk about that. For example, you didn't know how.
No, I didn't.
Talk about the significance of your college roommate and how that influenced your filmmaking.
Well, I don't know if you guys know Bradford Young, but Bradford is HU, who in the house. But Bradford is he's the first African American cinematographer nominated for the Academy Award in Hollywood. Me and Bradford were college roommates for 6 years in Washington D.C. and so this is like maybe 3 years before COVID. I was like, Brad, man, I want to tell this story. So, so I sat down with Brad, I unpacked the story for him. He was like, man, that's a hell of a story. He was like, he's like, what's up with Butch? Is he down? And I was like, ugh. I don't know.
Why weren't you down, Butch?
Well, I was trying to do a movie, so I had my life rights in New York searching for a movie. And then when Ish called me, and I said, you know what? Let's do it, Ish. I'm gonna get my life rights, and I'm gonna give it to you, and let's go ahead and get this thing done and get this thing told.
Why did you trust a first-time, no-time filmmaker? To be honest,
Good question.
Your roommate is an Oscar nominee, but you just his roommate. Why'd you trust him with this story?
Right. Well, I work with Ish, for, like he said, 9 years in my after-school program. So I knew a lot about Ish. He knew a lot about me. So when the after-school program was ending, Ish and I stayed in contact. And we started talking a lot more about the story and about what happened. And every time I tell him another story, he'd be like, oh, man, we got to tell this story. We got to tell this story. And so then, and I knew that we talked enough. I had more confidence in him than maybe the director who had 10 years in experience, because I talked to him enough. He knew my heart. He knew what the direction I wanted to see. And as a director, I knew I can keep talking to him. And I was able to keep talking to Ish, going through that process.
What's the pressure to get it right? Because this isn't a subject you're coming to kind of randomly. This is your friend. Mm-hmm. This is, for all intents and purposes, a hero to the city of Akron. This is a name that is not unknown. This is a world champion. Mm-hmm. How big was the pressure to get telling the story right?
Well, it wasn't really pressure from Butch or the city. I felt pressure, because I had people like Jonathan Hawk, who people call the king of 30 for 30, and Bradford Young, people in the industry, the folks over at ESPN. That's where the pressure came from. I didn't really, because it was all about integrity to me. I told Butch from the very beginning, I'm like, look, you don't have creative control over this project. We're gonna tell the story, and however that story unfolds is how it unfolds. So the pressure, so it was never pressure from Butch. It was just pressure of just creating the best piece of art that I could make, because people took a chance on me. And I didn't want to let anybody down, So I was just basically just like, look, we about to do this. We about to make something enduring. We about to make something beautiful.
Butch, what is that? When I heard Ismail say he tells you you're not going to have control over your life story. A life story where you didn't have control over what was done to you. So how did you wrap your mind around, again, putting your story and putting your life in the hands of other people and allowing them to tell it on your behalf?
Well, it's my choice, of course, to pick who I want to do it almost, right? So I knew that Ismail had enough knowledge and experience of who I was that I can trust that. Because if I didn't have enough confidence in him, no, I wouldn't have did nothing like that, of course. And I mean, when I was searching for a movie, I was searching for a certain director as well, because I knew how important to have, you know, not so much creative control, but the feeling of what I was standing for, and stand on principles, morals, and values, and have somebody who had that same principles is an easy, you know, pick at that time.
You say this in the movie, and it sounds incredible in the movie, but how are you not bitter? How are you not angry? How are you not, because I know getting the emotion of watching it, how, when we realize what has been done, how are you still not just angry? How?
You know, I'm not gonna say I was never angry or I was never mad. You know, I think when they took the $27 million from me was the hardest part, to be honest. You know.
So the name was cool, but the money.
Yeah, but they took the money because my name was already like suspect out there, so I knew that. But when they took the $27 million, it really changed my life, and it really changed how people looked at me. They didn't look at me as the man who went to Supreme Court. They didn't look at me as a man who stood on a 3-year suspension, came back and broke another world record on top of that. They didn't look at that. They didn't judge me on that. They just judged me on what they thought they knew. And it was sad because I had to live that life for the next 30 years like that. But then that's why I said before, when I got with my family and my son and my daughter, you know, I'm glad to say that when I got with my daughter, she was 1.5, and now she graduated from the Ohio State University Law School. And yes. So for me to put that type of atmosphere where she can achieve something like that, I mean, I won the process. I mean, they didn't get to me, you know, like, and I was able to give to others like I always wanted to, and still to this day.
You mentioned in the documentary that they wanted to make you a scapegoat.
Right.
Why you? Why was that ever a question that you asked? Why me? Why did they want to do this to Butch?
Well, you know, first of all, the European and the international, they really don't care for the U.S., okay? I mean, we're not their favorite ones in Europe, but I look at it as they gotta respect talent, and they gotta respect greatness no matter what. So when it comes to them using me as a scapegoat, you know, I knew that they didn't, when I say American athletes, not just me, there's a lot of American athletes, and they had a little thing about that because no American athlete has really taken a fall.
Right.
They had Ben Johnson, they had other European athletes taking a fall, but never the U.S. with a name took a fall. So when they made a mistake, they thought that, hey, we can run with this guy. Because I tell you, it was tough to stay strong enough to get to this point. Because any infraction, you know, ESPN wouldn't have took a chance on this. ESPN wouldn't have took a chance on this. If I would have acted out on that anger or acted out on that why me and that pity feeling, then that I'm a Gemini. You know, I can switch this. I can switch it. And I ain't want that one. I ain't like that guy. So I had to stay here and take the pain. And, you know, but it made me a better man. I mean, I'm older, but it made me a more wiser, because I realized setting a world record, you know, was happy. And going through the accusation was sad times. So you had to balance that out. And I'm always trying to balance out. Even when I was the world record holder, I try to balance it out. And being falsely accused in front of the world, I still try to balance that out, even though it was very challenging. But you see my daughter and my son, they really, you know, when you get that type of love, it really helps.
Well, that's one. But I also want to say is like, I think Butch was an easy target. And I say that because even though he had rose to the top of his profession, he was the world's fastest man, he still wasn't a household name across the country. He wasn't a Carl Lewis, you know. So it was, so, you know, but he was right there on the cusp of notoriety. I mean, you had just signed $1 million Nike deal, you know, a second Nike deal. so he had just shot a Super Bowl commercial that was slated to come out that next Super Bowl, which was shelved because of the steroid allegations. So it was like he was right there about to be that next marketable athlete along with the Jordan and the Tiger Woods but he just didn't have that name. So it was just, I think it was easier for them to kind of just choose him, and basically because no one knew him to a certain extent unless you're in the track and field arena. And I don't know. I want to say this is interesting because I was in D.C. a couple weeks ago, and I was sitting outside my hotel, and this guy was sitting out there, and we just started talking. He's like, I was like, introduce ourselves. This is his first time ever, and he was like a 60-year-old man. He was from London, the London area. He had never been to the United States before. So we were talking, and he said, "What do you do?" I said, "Well, I'm a filmmaker." And so I told him about False Positive, and he was like, "Butch Reynolds? I know Butch Reynolds." And the first thing he said to me was, he got caught up with the drugs, didn't he? But I just let you know, Butch is a household name in Europe. He just wasn't a household name here.
There's an Arabic proverb that says, "Live as brothers, do business as strangers." You all have been together for years, but when you're making this film and you have to tell your dear friend, "Nah, man, we're going to show this," or "We're going to have to put you in this light," or "We're going to talk to this person." What was that like? The business of the film versus the friendship that you share?
For me, the only part of the documentary that I was like, "Ish, why you had me so long?" When I was driving my car and I was thinking about, wait, is this time for me to run off this cliff or not? Mm-hmm. It wasn't that long of a ride, though. It wasn't that long. That's the only thing about that. I was like, man, Ish, come on, give me a break, But no, it was dealing with Ish was easy for this part, The hardest part when I was talking about my mom, that's when I broke down. I had to give about 30 minutes.
Yeah, that was because we shot Butch over a 3-day period in Akron, and any good director, you're gonna poke and you're gonna prod, because you're trying to get some emotion out of the subject, those are the best films, that evoke that emotion and just man, I'm getting just to see him break down like that. He needed a moment. I needed a moment. I had to get up and collect myself too. But when that happened, I was like, "Yo, we got to film, yo." You know what I'm saying? Because I knew that moment when we captured that moment. I was like, "Yo, we got something special."
There's something special that you've captured. What do you hope an audience takes from it? What do you want them at the end of the day to know about Butch?
Fair, honest, very open, willing to help, and they still didn't get what they wanted. They didn't get rid of me. I'm still here.
In the documentary, you talk about going back to school. You mention Frederick Douglass, Nelson Mandela. There's a Frederick Douglass quote that says, "I prayed for 20 years and got no answers until I prayed with my feet." And it's the idea of action, right? What was you talk about your family, but the action where you're like, "All right, Butch, enough is enough. Like, I got this will drown me if I don't do and start running, do what God gave you." What was that moment like for you to live it in real time?
I think that I believe in going through this process, you learn a lot, and you teach yourself a lot. And what I learned was grief. And the last part of grief was acceptance. And when I got to the point when I was able to accept what happened. I wasn't going after 27 million no more. I wasn't going after trying to clear the name no more. I just had to accept for that time where I was at. And then that's when truly I felt more relief. I felt more at ease. And that's when I met my family. Soon after that, that's when I met them. That's why I said, God, this is what you want me to do? I don't have no kids, you know. I lost one, true enough, don't get me wrong, but, it was an already made family. And I'm like, but that was the best way to keep my mind off of Butch, and keep my mind off of on someone else. And I knew they reciprocated with the love was a slam dunk for me then.
Ismail, you've created something that is enduring, and it is a story about your friend. What's next for you? Because Butch Part 2, like you can't, like as a filmmaker now, right? Is as you met this man on the street from London, and you say I'm a filmmaker. You've done this incredible work about this man you know so well. What's the next step for you?
Oh, man, I mean, I'm just looking to tell more provocative stories. I just think that when I look at the documentary landscape right now, it's I just feel like the only thing that really bothers me right now is just so much focus on celebrity right now, and I think the storytelling is suffering because of that. It's like there's so many good stories out there to tell. I think Butch has a great scripted narrative feature film in the making, because we left so much. We left so much on the editing floor. So many. We only had 100 minutes. You know what I'm saying? So, but there were so many moments of his story that that can be so cinematic. In a scripted feature. Like for instance, like it's a lot. One of the things I couldn't capture in the film is that when an athlete is accused of taking steroids, you see so basically they break the urine up in two samples. They have an A sample and a B sample. If the A sample tests positive, they give you a month, and then after a month they bring you in and test the B sample. If the B sample tests positive, then you're suspended. But in between that time, there's supposed to be strict confidentiality. But for some reason, Butch's test got leaked to the public. So Butch was telling me, he was like, yeah, man, I was at the New York City Marathon, and I was just coming downstairs, and he said he got off the elevator, and the paparazzi just hit him like, Butch, did you know you tested positive? He said the cameras was flashing in his face, and he said he just hit the button and went right back upstairs, and like, yo, what just happened? But can't you see that in the movie? Can't you see that moment in the movie? That would be so dope, so it's like, I would love to direct, my first narrative feature film, and I would love to do it around Butch's story, so,
I know we're running short on time, and so I have a couple of questions left. The first, I'll start with you, Ismail, and then I'll end with you, Butch. To you, Ismail, there are first-time directors and would-be filmmakers that are not only in the audience, but have been coming to the festival. And to have a space like the African American Film Festival here at Martha's Vineyard is wonderful. Can you maybe talk about that process of a first-time filmmaker getting it to ESPN and 30 for 30, working with a large entity, that's Disney, right? That this enormous entity, and speak about what that experience was like for people in the audience who might be interested in following in your shoes that would be first-time film directors.
Well, I mean, the first thing is always believe in yourself. That's number one. Great stories help. Number two, and relationships help. Because I look at this whole process of finishing this film, and I tell people that it was relational. You know, people look at Bradford, and his accomplishments, but I remember Bradford when he was a little scrawny kid from Louisville, Kentucky, who just hit the campus of Howard University, and watched him grow from incoming freshman into one of the prominent cinematographers in the business. So it's like, I would say just believe in yourself. People always, when people see my film, man, this is your first film? I'm like, yeah, this is my first one. What film school did you go to? I said, YouTube University. You know what I'm saying? That's where I spent countless nights and early mornings at my dining room table on YouTube, learning my craft and asking questions, and working closely with people like, John Hawk, and just really learning my craft, and so these relationships are so important, and the people over at ESPN and was so engaging and so helpful throughout the process, and so I would just tell anybody, it's just believing in yourself. And nowadays, you have so much information at your fingertips, so it's really no excuse for you not to be the best at what you want to do. It really just comes down to how bad you really want it.
Butch, this last question is for you. The Olympics are going on right now. We hear names like Sha'Carri, and you hear, someone just won the 400, the world's fastest man won the 100 and the 200. What's your relationship now with track? Can you watch it on TV and not feel away? Can you, in the closing parts of the film, you're on the track and, you still look like you're in fantastic shape. We're going to have to talk off stage what your regimen is. I need to, but can you still, can you go onto the track now? Can you watch it and not have emotions come up? Where are you with that right now?
I'm in a real good place this year, these Olympics. This is the first Olympics I was in this good place with that Olympics. Maybe because of the documentary or time itself. But in the beginning, I wasn't too enthused about watching the Olympics. Now, my daughter, she went to college. Her first year, she wanted to run track. So she was on the track team at Case Western Reserve University. And then the second year, she came to me and said, Dad, I think I'm going to study moral law instead of running. I was like, thank God. So I try not to tell or demean people's dreams for going to the Olympics, because that was my dream. And I, through experience, I realize now that, God got his hands on us. So if it's meant for you to do that process, it's not for me to control it. It's meant to give you the opportunity to do it. So I train, kids all day in track and field, football, basketball, whatever it is. I'm a trainer, and I'm also helping with after-school programs, and I do work with kids that way too.
First-time director of the ESPN documentary, The 30 for 30, false positive, and gold medal winner, world record holder, falsely accused, Butch Reynolds. Thank you both for joining us on stage at the Martha's Vineyard African American Film Festival. Thank you.